14 kilometers behind the Kreminna line, in a tree line barely wide enough to hide two vehicles, a Russian TOS-2 Tosochka thermobaric launcher sat idle between salvos. The crew thought they were invisible. The battery had displaced twice in 6 hours, exactly according to doctrine. Russian state media had published the Tosochka's specs enthusiastically. Survivable was the word they used, because of the wheeled chassis and rapid reload cycle. Fire, move, hide, fire again. 30 seconds of thermal signature, instead of the TOS-1A's longer burn. Hard to track, harder to target. The 425th Skala Assault Regiment's UAV cell had been watching it for 36 hours. A Shark long-range reconnaissance drone orbited at 3,800 meters, high enough to avoid most short-range EW, low enough to maintain optical lock. Below it, the Tosochka's two launchers, their reload trucks, and the command KAMAZ sat motionless in the tree shadow. The crew was confident. The Ukrainian sensor net overhead was not going to give them that confidence back. This is the story of 11 minutes and 40 seconds that erased a $9 million Russian thermobaric battery, a weapon Russian state media called a revolution in suppression fire, taken apart by roughly $60,000 worth of Ukrainian drones and one recon pass. The cost gap is not incidental, it is the point. Keep that number in mind. $9 million versus $60,000. We'll come back to what it means for every assault Russia plans on the Kreminna axis this summer. The Kreminna line has been one of the most contested stretches of the front since late 2022. The town sits on high ground above the Seversky Donets floodplain, and whoever controls the heights controls observation over a wide arc. Russia's 20th Guards Combined Arms Army has thrown successive waves at the Ukrainian defensive network there. Infantry assaults backed by armor, artillery preparation, and thermobaric fire to collapse fortified positions before the boots reach the wire. Thermobaric weapons are not conventional explosives. The TOS platform disperses a fuel-air aerosol across a target area and ignites it. The overpressure effect is catastrophic in enclosed spaces, bunkers, tree lines, fighting positions, and the thermal pulse collapses lungs at ranges where shrapnel would cause only wounds. Russia has used thermobaric fire consistently on this axis because it is specifically designed to break entrenched defenders who survive artillery. That is the tactical logic, and the TOS-2 Tosochka, the wheeled successor to the tracked TOS-1A, was supposed to make that logic work on a drone-saturated battlefield. It did not. Defense Express and Militarny, two Ukrainian open-source outlets with solid track records on equipment movements, had already flagged the Tosochka deployment. Both confirmed geolocated imagery within 36 hours of the battery's first firing. That is the first thing to understand about this engagement. By the time the TOS-2 crew thought they were safely hidden, the Ukrainian ISR net had already closed around them. The Shark drone, built by Ukrainian firm Ukrspec Systems, is a catapult-launched fixed-wing reconnaissance platform with a range of over 100 kilometers and endurance measured in hours, not minutes. At 3,800 meters, it sits above most portable air defense coverage, and well above the EW bubble that Russian Shipovnik-Aero ground systems project at lower altitudes. It carries electro-optical and thermal sensors capable of identifying vehicle types, tracking displacement patterns, and maintaining persistent coverage across a target area. It is not a strike platform. It is an eye, and in this kind of warfare, the eye that finds the target is worth more than the hand that strikes it. The Shark's data feed went to the 425th Skala Regiment's UAV Coordination Cell, operating alongside HUR, Ukrainian Military Intelligence, Signals Intelligence Assets. SIGINT gave the cell something the optical feed could not: radio emissions. The Tosochka battery's command KAMAZ was transmitting. That transmission confirmed the vehicle's exact position inside the tree line and gave the Ukrainian cell the targeting geometry they needed. Going through the open-source reconstruction published by Defense Express, one detail kept standing out. The battery had done everything right by Russian displacement doctrine. They moved twice before settling. They chose a tree line with overhead cover. They observed emission control between salvos. None of it mattered, because the Shark had been there from the beginning. You cannot displace away from an observer that was already watching you from the moment you arrived. Here's what's most surprising about this engagement. It wasn't the strike itself that decided the outcome. It was the decision loop. Who could close the sensor-to-shooter chain faster than the enemy could move? The answer, on this day, and on virtually every day of 2026 on the Eastern Front, has been Ukraine. When the Tosochka battery unmasked to fire its second salvo, launchers elevating, crews exposed, thermal signature spiking, the loop activated. The Shark handed off bearing and grid coordinates. The targeting package moved from recon to strike in seconds. The UAV cell had 3 assets committed: an octocopter bomber carrying a shaped charge, and 2 Vampire heavy drones, loaded with 80-kilogram PTAB submunition payloads. The Vampire, a Ukrainian-developed heavy strike UAS, is not an FPV. It does not dive into a target at high speed, seeking a single-point kill. It delivers its payload from standoff, dropping cluster submunitions over an area wide enough to cover a vehicle and the personnel around it. The PTAB submunition is a shaped charge bomblet designed to penetrate top armor, the thinnest part of any armored vehicle, and the 80-kilogram payload disperses dozens of them across the target footprint. Against an unarmored launcher truck, the effect is saturation of the target area with high-velocity fragmentation and shaped charges. The launcher does not survive that. Before we get to what the strike sequence looked like second by second, a quick word. You're watching Fury Military, where we break down this war system by system, engagement by engagement, every week. If you're not subscribed yet, hit that button, because the next video is already built around a kill chain story that makes this one look slow. The octocopter went first. It was tasked to the command KAMAZ, the communications hub of the battery, the vehicle whose destruction would cut coordination between the launchers and the reload trucks. The shaped charge it carried was purpose-built for vehicle kills, a focused penetrator designed to defeat light armor and detonate inside the crew compartment. The KAMAZ was not armored. The strike removed it from the engagement before either launcher crew could be warned. 11 seconds elapsed between the octocopter's strike and the first Vampire payload release. The 2 Vampire drones engaged the launchers in sequence. Both Tosochka vehicles were still in firing position. Crews had not yet received warning, because the command vehicle was gone. The first Vampire's PTAB submunition payload dispersed across the lead launcher. The second followed within 30 seconds on the trailing vehicle. Both launchers were confirmed destroyed in geolocated imagery, published by Militarny within 4 hours of the engagement. The reload trucks died last. This is where fiber-optic FPVs came in, the ones that have changed the counter-EW calculation on the Eastern Front in 2026. Conventional radio frequency FPV drones are vulnerable to Shipovnik-Aero and similar Russian EW systems, which jam the control link and send the drone into a fail-safe crash. Fiber-optic FPVs carry their own data link, a thin cable that spools out behind them, physically connecting the pilot to the drone with no radio frequency to jam. The Shipovnik-Aero has no answer for a fiber connection. There is no signal to sever. The reload trucks, the logistics backbone of the battery, carrying the Thermobaric rocket modules that give the TOS-2 its strategic value, were targeted and destroyed by fiber-optic FPV strikes after the launchers were already gone. Total elapsed time from the moment the Tosochka unmasked to the last confirmed strike, 11 minutes and 40 seconds. Here's the take that'll probably draw some disagreement. This engagement isn't notable because Ukraine destroyed a Russian vehicle. That happens every day on this front. It's notable because the Tosochka is exactly the system Russia promoted as the answer to Ukrainian drone dominance. The shorter thermal signature, the wheeled mobility, the rapid displacement cycle, Russian defense industry marketed all of it as the evolution past the TOS-1A's vulnerabilities. And here it is, gone in under 12 minutes, on its second salvo. What does that tell us about the gap between Russian defense procurement claims and battlefield reality? ISW analysts have documented repeatedly in 2026 that Russian forces have been operating under a persistent assumption about the effectiveness of their EW umbrella. The assumption, embedded in Russian tactical doctrine for mechanized operations, is that EW coverage degrades Ukrainian UAV effectiveness enough to permit the kind of massed fire support that worked in the Donbass in 2014 and 2015. That assumption was wrong then. It is catastrophically wrong now. Put yourself in the position of the Russian battalion commander who ordered that thermobaric fire mission. The Tosochka was supposed to flatten Ukrainian trench positions before the 144th Motor Rifle Division's assault. The assault is now going in without that preparation. This is not an academic question. It is measured in Russian infantry casualties on the approach. Push through the trench line without thermobaric suppression, or halt the assault and reassess? That is the tactical choice the 144th Battalion commanders faced after the 425th Skala's UAV cell finished its work. Tell us what you think in the comments, because the answer reveals something important about where Russian tactical doctrine goes from here. The Russian Ministry of Defense briefings have not acknowledged the loss of the Tosochka battery. They rarely do. The standard formulation from Peskov's office and the MOD's daily readout is that Russian forces are conducting successful fire missions and neutralizing enemy fortifications on the Kreminna axis. That language continued appearing in official statements after Defense Express published geolocated confirmation of the destroyed vehicles. This is the official line versus reality gap that runs through every major engagement on this front. ISW's daily updates, cross-referenced with Ukrainian OSINT outlets and commercial satellite imagery from Planet Labs, have documented a consistent pattern. Every thermobaric MLRS system Russia has deployed east of the Oskil River in 2026 has been detected within 48 hours of arrival and destroyed within a week. Every one. The strategic math is straightforward. A TOS-2 Tosochka launcher costs approximately $9 million per unit. Ukraine's Shark drone sortie costs a fraction of that. The Vampire strike packages, 2 drones, PTAB payload, run approximately $40,000 to $50,000 per engagement at current production cost estimates from Ukrainian defense industry reporting. Fiber-optic FPV strikes add perhaps another $8,000 to $10,000. Total, somewhere around $60,000 in drone expenditure to eliminate $9 million in Russian thermobaric capability. You cannot sustain a war economy around those exchange ratios if you're on the losing end of them. And right now, Russia is reliably on the losing end every time it deploys a TOS platform anywhere within Ukrainian UAV range, which, with the Shark's 100-plus kilometer operating radius, covers most of the Eastern Front. This is what sensor-driven warfare actually looks like, and why mass alone no longer wins. The Tosochka isn't failing because Russia's crews are incompetent. They are following their doctrine correctly. The doctrine is failing because it was written for a battlefield, where the enemy could not maintain persistent reconnaissance over your second echelon. That battlefield no longer exists. Defense Express noted in their post-engagement analysis that the 20th Guards Combined Arms Army has now lost multiple thermobaric Myalaris assets on the Kreminna axis in 2026. The cumulative effect on Russian assault planning is measurable. Without thermobaric preparation, Russian infantry assault units attacking entrenched Ukrainian positions are sustaining higher casualties on approach. The 144th Motor Rifle Division's assault tempo on the northern Kreminna axis has slowed accordingly, per ISW tracking of geolocated engagement reports through June 2026. One detail from the open-source reconstruction that stuck with me. The Tosochka crew had followed displacement doctrine almost exactly. 2 moves in 6 hours. Overhead cover selected. Emission control between salvos. The gap between following doctrine correctly and surviving the engagement is the persistent surveillance the Shark provides. There is no displacement pattern that defeats an observer that watched you from the moment you arrived in the operational area. The 425th Skala Assault Regiment has appeared in multiple documented engagements in the Kreminna sector through 2025 and into 2026. Ukrainian assault regiments in the current phase of the war are not the static defenders of the early Donbass fighting. They are combined arms units with organic UAV cells, EW capabilities, and established ISR-to-strike pipelines. The institutional knowledge those cells carry, the pattern recognition, the established frequencies with HUR SIGINT, the practiced handoff from Shark to strike package, is not something Russia can replicate quickly. A larger conscription cohort does not buy that. Here's what this tells us about the current phase of the war. The question is no longer whether Ukraine's sensor net can find high-value Russian systems operating in the second echelon. The evidence of 2025 and 2026 is that it can, reliably and quickly. The question is whether Russia can change its operational approach fast enough to matter, and the evidence from the Kreminna axis suggests the answer, so far, is no. The effect compounds. Every thermobaric battery lost is not just a $9 million line item. It is a capability gap in the fire support available to Russian assault units, a gap that forces Russian commanders to choose between attacking without suppression, delaying until replacement systems arrive, and risk detection again, or abandoning assault objectives entirely. All 3 options are worse than the pre-engagement situation. The kill chain is not just deleting vehicles, It is deleting Russia's ability to mass fires at the operational level. ISW analysts have tracked this explicitly. Russian forces on multiple axes have reduced the frequency of TOS system deployments in 2026 compared to 2024. That reduction is not because Russia ran out of thermobaric doctrine. It is because the cost of deploying those systems now reliably exceeds the tactical value they provide before they are destroyed. That is a strategic adaptation forced by exactly the kind of engagement the 425th Skala executed at Kreminna. Comment yes if you think Russia adapts its thermobaric deployment doctrine within the next 6 months, or no if you think the institutional inertia holds and the losses keep compounding. We read every comment. The forward question this engagement leaves open: if Ukraine's persistent ISR coverage now reaches reliably into Russia's second echelon on the Eastern Front, what Russian asset class gets targeted next? Fiber-optic FPVs have already made the first echelon lethal for Russian armor. Sharks and similar platforms are now making the second echelon lethal for fire support systems. The logical follow-on is third echelon logistics, the ammunition depots, fuel points, and rail transfer stations that feed the entire Russian operational system east of the Oskil. We covered the strike on a Russian ammunition depot at Svatove earlier this month. If you haven't seen that video, it's linked above. Because the pattern the 425th Skala established at Kreminna is not an isolated tactical success. It is a data point in a trend that ISW, Defense Express, and every serious open-source analyst tracking this front has identified. Ukraine's kill chain is extending its reach faster than Russia is extending its EW coverage. At some point, those two curves cross, and the side with more depth behind its front line when they cross is the side that shapes the operational outcome. Russia's 20th Guards Combined Arms Army still has assets to commit on the Kreminna axis. The 144th Motor Rifle Division is still pressing. The front has not broken, but the fire support architecture that was supposed to make those assaults viable is being systematically dismantled, engagement by engagement, 11 minutes and 40 seconds at a time. If you're finding this breakdown useful, subscribe to Fury Military. We cover this war system by system, kill chain by kill chain, and we're putting out new analysis every week. The next video looks at what happens when Russia tries to solve its FPV problem with a new EW deployment, and why the solution may be creating a bigger vulnerability than the problem it's fixing. The point of this analysis isn't to celebrate destruction, but to understand the military and human realities behind it, because the clearer we see modern war, the clearer the value of deterrence, stability, and a just peace becomes.